So anyway, I may have to make a separate one on that for those who didn't attend today. So I'm going to move on to the next item on the list. After I view that, I'll open it up for questions, because the next thing I'll go into is going to be related to the accounts receivable. And so for those who are on the class or attending today, if you don't use accounts receivable, you can go ahead and drop off of the class. So the next subject that I want to cover is setting up recurring payments in the banking section and some other tips for creating checks. This I'm going to do in this particular demo. So if you're in banking and you've got your vendor set up, a lot of people have monthly, particularly monthly, but it can be used for weekly and everything, and I'll set up recurring payments. So when you're into here, we have these set up as monthly occurrences, our utility bill, our telephone bill, maybe our health insurance or whatever. Like those particular, the health insurance is probably going to be one of those that it's a flat amount, like 400, some flat amount every month. And so you could go ahead and when you create this, how often does it happen? What vendor supplier you're using, the amount, and then what GL account you're going to put it to. So when you go to look at the recurring payments, you can see this is $400. These that I have set up for $1, you could set them up for $0. Those are ones that are going to have a different dollar amount every month. So you could still use it to keep track of it, but we would fill in the new dollar amount each month. So you can have as many of these as you want. Again, there's different frequencies. So if you had something that you paid twice a month, or if you pay every week, you could set these up as weekly. And so when you go into entering checks, you can go ahead and you can click on this recurring. And that's going to bring up all the recurring checks that you have. I already paid. It's saying the last time we paid was on the 2nd, so the next time we're going to pay, so it's not due. But if you want to go ahead and enter it in, you can click. Well, you would, for like the telephone bill. Well, this month our telephone bill was $67.23, and for our utility bill this month was $450, and the light bill was $87. So that is pulling numbers, and our rent hasn't changed, so it's still that amount. So which ones of these we're going to use? Well, we'll go ahead. Those were the ones that came in that had different amounts, but this is the flat amounts. And so you can click all of these and you can click create checks. Now in these cases, since we're going to pretend it's an automatic withdrawal, so in this case, we're just going to use other, that these are just automatically paid. If you were going, some are automatically withheld and some you're going to create a check, well, then you would just check the ones that are going to go with the other and then create those checks, and then go back and check the one that you're going to create a check and choose computer, and then it'll create a computer check. But I'm just going to go ahead and the checks were created. So it's a fast way of creating reoccurring checks, and especially those that are the same amount every month. You don't have to do anything, and this is the one that you might be printing, but then you can go ahead and post these checks. You can scroll through them. In the case, if you're entering a lot of checks, then it's quite simple. It may be easier to go to bank processing, bank posting, and we'll select checks. So we can see these are the checks that have been created and not posted, but these are the ones that we created today. And so I'm just going to go ahead and select the ones that we created today to post them. And so they're all posted. And if they were computer checks, if you go back into checks and just pull up any one of them, or say up to the date. We'll just pick that particular one, but they we put them in as other, but if they were computer checks, when you go to print, you would use queued checks so that it would print all 5 of them at once, based on the assignment of the check number. So that's something many of you might want to take advantage of if you have a lot of recurring monthly checks. It's just a quick way to get those checks taken care of. The other things as you're entering in checks, I mean, instead of the recurring check, what you can also do, and this is more like an annual check, but you can pull up any check. So let's just, you can see we have, I'll just say there's this My Bank. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to fill it out. You can just pull up a check and say duplicate it. And it's going to assign the next check number. It's going to put in today's date, but you can change the date. And it's just a quick way to, it's like, oh, this was my monthly note payment that I put in. And so duplicating a check, or if it's a check that you for various expenses, but it's to a different vendor, you could always duplicate it and then come here and select a different vendor in terms of speeding up the entry of checks. And so that's just a little thing I think some of the people would like to have available and will take advantage of. But while I'm in this, I'm going to show you a few things, and I'll lead into our next part as far as the cash register. But bank accounts can be used in a number of different ways. I set it up to where, and this is where we'll get into the cash register, petty cash, cash on hand. I know a couple of our class members do have a cash on hand or cash register bank account, and they basically, it's a petty cash drawer, and so whatever money is in the cash register or cash drawer, that balance should be the same as if you in here should match up with what's in the cash register itself. So in setting that up, there's no bank account, you just bank name, cash register. And so it's a bank account, but you still assign it to a GL account because, well, in the case of an example earlier this week, I spoke with one of the members, they had paid outs, well, you want to expense that paid out, and which would be done via an adjustment. And then if you notice, I also had set up a credit card bank account. So I just called it credit card. And if you were maintaining a full general ledger, I selected credit cards payable, which is a liability account. And the only thing is the system set up to where it will give you a warning that, wait a minute, bank accounts are usually an asset account. But in this case, no, it's okay. It's a liability account. And then you treat the credit card just like you treat your checkbook. So if you go in, and I haven't done any in here, but if you went in and you said, oh, I got my credit card statement and I want to re-enter everything off of my credit card, you could pull up your credit card bank account, click new, and you can go through and enter in your various charges to your credit card. And it could be using the same vendor because you charged it to ABC Marketing Company. So you enter it in just like a check. I don't know, this expensive to something. We'll spend it to advertising, and we go ahead and post it and say yes. And so the only thing that's different is if you go into your banking journals and you go up and pull up, pull up the credit card bank account, you'll see that you have a negative $67. And so that's how much, if that was your only charge for the month, and your credit card statement said that you owed $67, you know that you matched up. And you can actually do the bank rec in the same way, in terms of go in and mark the charges that you've made on a credit card as cleared, and go in and mark any payments you've made to the credit card as deposits. And so you can keep a running balance on this. So just the way you would typically use this is if you went to the automatic cash transfer, it's like, well, I'm going to go pay off my credit card. And so you're transferring things from your regular checking account, and you're transferring it to your credit card. And in our case, it was $67. And in this case, I didn't set it up, but you could create your own category called credit card payment. And I'll just put in other for right now and say transfer. And so if you have your credit card set up as an automatic, you could do that transfer. So now if you went into the banking journals, you can see our bank balance is 0. And for that, and if you look at the deposits for the credit card, I'll update it as adjustment. You'll see the adjustment of $67 that paid the credit card. So a lot of people are using credit cards, especially if so many of the credit cards now are cash rewards type things. So it pays to actually use your credit card instead of paying by cash or check, in terms of some of those benefits. So that's an idea that some of you might want to use, whether it's for the cash register, for the credit card. And again, even the recurring payments could be used if there's something that's automatically charged to your account, because when you go into the checks and you select the bank account that you want to use, you could do the credit card and go into the recurring, and you have that automatic, you can have an automatically recurring credit card payment, or the balance, depending on how you have it set up with your credit card. So that was just some tips on taking advantage of some of the tools that are available in the banking part of the software. And in our next session with the cash register, we'll get back to this, but then I'll also show how some people use this as a quasi point of sale, where they actually have their computer beside their cash register, and they can create invoices and print them, and a lot of them can be cash, and we'll get into that in the next session. So let's go back to. So we have some examples here. I've done these first two things here. So the next thing I'm going to move on to is the cash register idea, but we'll kind of pause here. And for those who don't use accounts receivable, but maybe have some other questions they'd like answered, whether it be on payroll or on the banking. In prior sessions, we did do the MICR check. We haven't gone into the reconcile. I might do that for next week's class. Showed you the setting up of recurring payments today, and I went over a few options for creating checks. And so let's just look at the chat. What do we have in chat here? Recurring payments can only be paid by check, or can you use ACH or credit card payments? Well, I did answer the credit card, the ACH. We don't have that. That is something that's on the to create an ACH file similar to the way we create an ACH direct deposit check file. But that's not part of the banking system at this point in time. Are there any other questions that people might have? Okay. Well, I'm going to back up and I'm going to go into the, we got 25 minutes left here, and I set it up in the same one. So what I need to maybe point out a little bit in terms of the accounts receivable side of things, that's a little different in terms of when you're receiving payments. When you enter in payments on a receivable in the new version, you're not picking a bank account like you have to do in Classic. In Classic, you go in to receive payment, but you pick which bank account that payment's going to go into. We do that when we actually make the deposit. So any payment still goes to an undeposited cash account, but it's only when we make the deposit that we select the bank account we're going to put that cash to. So that's where it's a little bit different in that regard. But if we're going to run this as a cash register kind of thing, one thing is you don't have to run it through receivables. If you just want to have a petty cash per se and not a cash register, you know, you can come in here and you can set up a bank account, and instead of calling it cash register, just call it petty cash. And you're not tying invoices and that thing to it. You're just going in and you have a drawer with money in it and it's got $15. And when you pay out cash from it, then you would go into this cash register and enter it as a check, like we did with earlier. Or if you are going to transfer money, I mean, you could do a transfer. Maybe you cut a check for cash, and you can come in here and you're going to reimburse, you know, from your checking account to your petty cash account just to reimburse it because you've spent all the money. You know, you can manage that petty cash drawer just like the cash register, only instead of it being in the bank, it's in your cash drawer. So that's something to keep in mind. But in terms of taking this one step further, if you want to be tracking and printing out receipts, this is where it's somewhat like a point of sale. It's not a point of sale, but it can be used in a similar manner. So what you could have is you could have this up on screen, and you could just have this here. And if it's an existing customer that comes in, then you could pull this up and pull up that customer. If it's a cash sale, typically what I would do is just click cash. And here is a cash sale. The last time I used that, I was this, but I'm just going to duplicate that. We're going to create a new invoice. And this time we sold, let's just say we sold 3. And it's taxable. We can choose a different product if we want to put in gadgets, and that's what the total is. If it was taxable, need to update this. And you might want to default your cash customer as always taxable if you're always calculating tax. Otherwise, once you check fixed costs, it will do that. And so when you go to just save this transaction, and if they charged it, now it's charged. If they, and of course you'd have a person up here if it was charged, but since it was a cash sale, you can come in here and you can print a receipt, but we'll just say it was they paid cash and they paid the full $6.42. And they'll apply. If you want a receipt, you can click on this. When you click apply payment, it'll bring this up, and if you put in, if they gave you a $10 bill, then you could fill in $10 and you could print out a receipt this way. Or you have the other option to go ahead and just print the invoice as a receipt. And so it would have the itemization of everything purchased here, and down here it would show the payment. So if it was credit card, you could have put in CC, so it was a credit card payment. Or if it was a check, you could put in the check number. So then that particular sale's done. Somebody else comes in and they're a customer. Well, you can say, well, Tasty Bites came in and they bought something. This is a finance charge, but and we'll let me duplicate a finance charge. I better come down. And the other thing is, you could, if you're searching by customer, you can change this to searching by company. And so when I'm searching by company, I go to, say, Weber. And so that brings up the Weber one, or if you click new and click Weber. So now you're bringing them up, and if they're going to charge it, then you just come down here and you fill in your invoice and product 3, and it's taxable. And again, they can be set up as taxable already, and for 75 cents, let's just say they bought 50. And posted it, saved it. They're not going to pay for it, but if they're there already, you can go ahead and you can print this out for him, and it will show that that's the amount that's still due, as opposed to the last one where we made a payment. It showed the amount that was 0, and then it showed the payment down below. So at the end of the day, when if you're going to balance to your cash register, you would go over into banking, and you would go into deposits, and you're going to put a deposit into the cash register. So this is where we select the bank account, as opposed to like in Classic, you had to select the bank account when you enter the payment. And so you would come into here, you would go into the deposit slip, and you would look at undeposited payments. And you could see today that we had these 2 cash sales, and we had, well, those are the 2 that we had, I guess. We didn't post. Oh, the other one was a charge that we entered. And so these were the only cash sales. So in terms of adding to the deposit slip, you can see that we have a total of $220.42 that got deposited into our cash register. And so if you went in and looked at your banking journal again and looked at the cash register and looked at the deposits. Oh, I didn't post it.
Roger, I just wanted to let you know that Barb has a question for you out in the chat about deleting categories.
Okay, I will go to that here in a second. So you see that deposit of $220.42. That memo is if when you made that deposit, there's a memo line you could have filled in what it was for, but now it's put the that into the cash register. And so we've recorded the sale. It's in our general, or if they paid it because we're on a cash basis, it's in our general ledger. It's now updated our bank account. And then we had one person who's is on our receivables. But then maybe you're going to take some of that money to the bank that's in your cash drawer. So again, that's when you can use your automatic cash transfer. And maybe you don't want to transfer the full 242 for the day. You'd want to just transfer 200. And in this case, you're transferring it from the cash register to your checking account. And we probably create a category called the transfer. And so then once we've made this, we can transfer this amount. And so now if we went into our banking journals, you can see we only got $20 in our cash register. So if we open up our cash register, we should be able to count out $20.42. But then if you look at your checking account and go to the, this is probably an adjustment. And you can see the $200 that we just transferred from the cash register into our bank account. So some ideas on a cash register and how you could possibly use it as, I know the one individual that I worked with, they're writing up manual invoices by the cash register and entering them into People's Choice Classic later. And in this case, you could still do it that way and not have it here and go back and enter these invoices from the cash register manual tickets, entering in manual invoices. But it'd be a way that you can generate the invoice and well as print it as a receipt when the customer's there, or as a charge, you know, if they're charging it and going to pick it up later. The other aspect that, and maybe I'll cover that next week, is how to manage deposits against a project. So if somebody's buying something for $2,000 and it's a special order, you could go in and you can record a payment, an unapplied payment that would give them a credit because maybe they had to do a 50% deposit or something like that. But we can cover that in another one. So let me go look at the chat here. How to delete categories where a deposit can go and how to delete categories for paying by checks. So when you say category, I'm assuming you mean a GL account, general ledger account. So if you want to get rid of a general ledger account, you would go into accounting. You would go into chart of accounts. And you would go and whether it's an expense or if it's a revenue account, I mean, these are all going to be numbers that you're used to from your conversion from Classic. But let's just, now the only time you can delete them is if you've never had any activity in a GL account. So a limitation to this is if you're bringing over 5 years of history, then but you don't use that account anymore, it's not going to let you delete it. Now you can renumber it, but if you've converted the data over and it's account that's been in your Classic, but you don't use it or never have used it, you can go in. And so like, I don't think I have any categories here. I can click on that X here, this hardware sales, New Year's promotion, and click OK. And since I've never used it, it deleted it from the system. However, if I went into this one, you cannot delete an account with a balance. So if you archive your data, so let's say you have 10 years of history, but you're just going to archive it so you only have 3 years of history. If that count hadn't been used for over 3 years and you archive, then you'd be able to delete it. So there are some limitations of deleting it. But the other thing is if let's say we didn't want to use this, we have a lot of activity in this account, but we didn't want to use it anymore. What I've had people do is we go into here and change this to like 9998 or however many that you have available, and mark it do not use. And that way, if you make that change when you're entering in data and you go to your search list, so let's just say I'm entering in a new invoice. Let's say new. I'll just say it's a cash sale. So in that case, whenever, if you were just to manually type in, you don't use an item, you just put a miscellaneous sale. And whether this is in accounts receivable, an invoice like I'm doing here, or you're entering a check or whatever, when you go to look at the drop-down list and you go to 4, you'll see that account isn't there anymore. But if I typed in a 9, oops, and you'll see the 9, you'll see that account that I just changed from that 4,000 to that 998 do not use anymore. So one of those methods, either deleting it if there's no activity, or if you just don't want to use it anymore, you can renumber it and give it a 999 number, so you know it's always at the bottom of the list when you go into search for an account. So did that answer your question, Barb? Well, you don't inactivate the account, you just renumber it to put it at the bottom of the list. So any other questions that have come up here? I've covered those things that I kind of said I would work on ahead of time. Are there other AR, accounts receivable, or if you want to backtrack to some other banking or payroll questions, we have about another 6-7 minutes that we could go over some things. And I will, because I forgot about getting the recording started, I'll make a separate little video on doing the employee templates and how you could use that. And I'll be able to streamline that to be a little bit faster anyway. So let's kind of go back to our list. Something that we might be able to cover fairly quickly. Setting up for 1099 processing, that's a fairly easy thing to do. We have a new question. So in your setup, you're going to go, and if you are going to getting basic, meaning you won't have sales and purchases, the vendors are going to be in your banking menu. So, but in our example here, the vendors are in the purchases. So let's say we need to pull up the supplier, and down here is where you would select the 1099 type. And so we can set it up as an interest 1099, an NEC, which is what probably 90% of your 1099s, but some of you may have to do a 1099 on the rents that you've done. Very few will use the royalties and other income. But these are the 1099s that are supported. So we'll just say this is a 1099. If you wanted a beginning balance or you hadn't been tracking, I'm not positive how this comes over from the conversion. But you can set this up so then at the end of the year, anytime you've used this particular vendor or supplier, then you will be able to go into 1099s, and you can go and be able to generate the 1099s. Opened up a different window for me. And so it'll go through that process. We'll probably review this again later in the year once we have the 2023 W-2s and 1099 updates ready. They should be ready for testing, and also then I'll be able to do some demonstrations prior to the tax update being and sent out to you for updating. So we've reached our close to our end. Is there any other questions that anybody would like me to cover? Chat here. I'm not seeing anything. So otherwise, I've been in touch with a lot of you one-on-one as we're converting and testing things out. So those of you that haven't uploaded a backup to be converted, you should really get that done, because you learn a lot more working with your own data than you do working with demos, because you recognize the customers, if you have them, you recognize the vendors and the checks and the bank accounts and so forth. So it's a little more apples to apples when you're trying to learn how it's done in Classic versus how it's done in the new version. At least you're looking at the same vendors and the same bank accounts, and also all the history that you had in there. At least on that first round, where you at least have 1 or 2 years of history, and then when you do the final one, we'd want to have everything ready, and you feel comfortable that you're ready to do the final conversion, and then we can select whether you want 5 or 7 years or 3 years of data. I know we have one accountant that's on our class who uses People's Choice for a number of clients. We're establishing a tiered conversion cost if you have to convert more than one company over and above, but it's going to be probably tiered because some people don't use payroll, they don't use accounts receivable, they're just using it for a checkbook, and so the conversion of that is much simpler and faster than if you have payroll and accounts receivable and a large inventory. And I know some of our people attending the class with a lot of history, if we're going to do 5 to 7 years, I mean, it's not a quick conversion. I mean, it takes about 3 or 4 hours if you're bringing in a lot of history. And so we're trying to establish how we will charge, and we may we'll come up with the tiered and then take a look at it, but then also the amount of history that you want. If you have to have a lot of history and it's a large amount, then the charge might be higher. If it's just a simple payroll that you're especially if you're going to start at the beginning of the year, that's going to cost a lot less. And hopefully we'll have that for you here by the 1st of December. So if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.